This presentation I'm doing today is a little bit different. Leslie, can you step up here just a minute? Everybody take a look back at the back. This is my daughter Leslie right here. She drove all the way down from St. Louis to be down here at this meeting. I want everybody to understand something, and we were kind of talking about this at the meeting last night, and I don't think any of us fully appreciate or realize. I didn't mean for you to come up here if that's good. She didn't know I was going to do that. But I don't think any of us fully appreciate or realize the impact that we have on others around us or the world around us. So when you leave this meeting, I want you to, of course, be thinking about the trees. I know you will. But also think about the difference that you have and the difference that you make in the world. And so that's what I want to go with. This is me with my son at Tahlequah State Park and taking fishing. And Leslie was up here a while ago when she was little. I did the same thing for her. We went on canoeing trips, kayaking. We planted flower beds. We did a little bit of everything. We gardened together. That's a place that we're going to pave in. We'll look at the gas price right there, $1.14. They were going to pave this place in Poplar Bluff, and guess what? We adopted it, and we planted 5 flower beds out there. And Leslie will tell you today some of her best memories were kayak trips that we went on, fishing, that sort of thing. So we really don't think about the impact that we have on others around us or the world around us. And so that kind of goes back into Harold up here a while ago speaking. And I grew up in the farmland down the Boot Hill. And I think when you grow up in a place where it doesn't have trees or springs, you have a good appreciation for that. And ever since I was about 4 years old, I was coming up the Current River. And we had a place we were camping at. And that's where I first met Harold. And Harold still camps up there, and I still do too. And drink water out of the same spring I drank out when I was 4 years old. And sitting around the campfire at night is when I first started talking to Harold and started getting real curious about this tree. And so one thing led to another. This is the Upper Current River, so it's so ironic. I've kind of gone full circle, and now I work on the very river right where we used to camp, and we had property on it one time. That's all eminent domain now, and it no longer belongs to us, but I still camp up there. And I went down there. This is in our campground in the park. I went there for this owl. That owl was in the water, about to drown. I rescued it, fed it, put it back up on the branch. The parents came to it. I do stuff like that all the time. And so I've got a neat job. I actually do it for free, but I wouldn't want them to know about it. And so one thing led to another. We do a lot of stuff. We got fishing line all along the river for people fishing, and it gets hung up on wildlife, and I was constantly dealing with it. I'm one of these people that don't just go out and take care of things. I'm like, well, why is this happening? Why is this taking place? So we went in, and I've got a whole crew of people that help me. We actually removed fishing line from the river, and it saved a lot of bats, a lot of birds, even bald eagles. So one person can make a difference. And I've got one guy that actually cut down and saved from 3 different parts close to 6,000 fishing lures. And he gave those all out to kids on their free fishing days. So that one person made a big difference and recycled that. So you can all make a difference. Well, there's this one guy that turns 97 this year. This is kind of what he told me right here. He's talking about the Ozark Chinquapin being delicious, and they would fall every year. They're more dependable than a crop of corn. And people would collect those, they'd shovel them up, they were good to eat, wildlife loved them. And I thought, why have I never heard about this tree before? You finally get to the point when you learn enough, you realize you don't know anything. And so Harold was telling me about how that the wildlife would fatten up on these, and then how the trees start dying off in the 50s and 60s. And now the trees are all gone, and nobody's heard of them. And it was a pretty sad thing to hear that. And behind you, on these tables over here, are different recollections that are laid out. I want everybody to take a look at these and read them, because at the end of the day, AJ and I want you to stand by the one you most closely identify. We're going to spread those out, right, AJ? We have a special, neat little program we're going to do this afternoon that covers this. So this is what I would hear all the time. And at the time I wrote this, he was 93, he's a little older now. And so I thought, well, how come is it nobody has ever heard anything about these trees? Well, the Ozark Chinquapin, Cascanea ozarkensis, sometimes called Chinquapin, Ozark Ozark chestnut. It was a real drought-tolerant tree. It grew up 65 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet in diameter. When I first found out about this and I looked online, there was almost no information online about it. And so, talking to Harold, I knew he wasn't making this up. And so I started interviewing other people. And the tree blooms in late May. Actually, it blooms right around June 1, after the threat of frost. So it makes nuts every single year without fail. And so anyhow, he said they were so plentiful, we'd scoop them up and put them into wagons. And I thought, how can a nut be that plentiful? Well, I'll tell you what, we're actually seeing this. Right where Harold camps at, right above him, there's a hill up there. And our meeting last year, I wrote to Kelly and Donna telling them about Harold and his brother going up and looking at those trees. Let me tell you what, this man over here was glowing, and he looked like a 10-year-old with his brother. They had, never seen these trees since the 40s, and so it was like seeing somebody coming back from the dead. It's pretty incredible. So they were just on cloud 9. So they parked their four-wheelers. They did not drive four-wheelers up on that hill. The roads were closed. They walked up there. Harold and his brother did. And I'll tell you what, me working on these trees has kept me in good health. So it's good exercise. This picture you see in the background right here, AJ, raise up your hand. AJ heard me talking about this and the people I interviewed, and AJ's kind of like, well, how come nobody's ever heard of this stuff before, Steve, that you're telling me? One thing led to another. AJ interviewed Harold, and he also interviewed Tino Burnett, and who's not here today, can't be here. And AJ actually is an artist. AJ can deal with everything. AJ drew this picture based on what Harold and other people said about the nuts being so plentiful. Entered this in the art show at Cape Girardeau, correct? Won first place in the art show with this picture. So the historic range of the tree, when I went online, this is pretty well what I found. Current tree books would say this too. Real small range of the tree. Well, I started going back and looking at old tree books and a larger range into Arkansas, a little bit in Missouri and Oklahoma. Over here you see just 2 spots over here. And I saw there's a sliver of it in Alabama. And I thought, well, how can it be in Alabama and skip all the way over there? Something didn't make sense. And Tori, do you care to get me a little shot of tea over there in the cup? I don't know where she's at. Or Esme, do you care to pour one over there? Some in the fridge over there. I'm about to drive right here. So I started looking at these old, going to different libraries. And I became a man on a mission. I actually went to a library in Houston, Texas, down in Birmingham, Alabama, Little Rock, Arkansas, and I started looking at old tree books, not online, but old tree books. So if you go back to the 50s and 60s, a larger range in Alabama, a larger range right here we're at, and barely into Texas. And then I found this one from the 1940s. And I thought, what is going on here? And then I found this one from 1907. And it showed about 40% of Missouri. Now, this was within the range of the Allegheny. There's a lot of confusion. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. By the way, this is Asma. She drove all the way up here to film this meeting, and she put it online on her website for us. Thank you, Asma. So I thought, what is going on here? And number one, the biggest thing I was dealing with was people had not even heard of this tree. And so it started getting to the point where I felt like almost like Johnny Appleseed, and nobody knew what the apple was. That's really what was going on. Harold knew, and I knew, and then later on AJ did. AJ started writing articles. He wrote one for Missouri Conservationist. He actually arranged it. The other gentleman with you, I can't think of his name. We were on TV, on Channel 12 News. That was in 2006 or 2007. And so little by little, we started getting the word out. This is from 1879, and it's talking about all the trees in southern Missouri, from the Missouri River all the way down to southeast Missouri. And they mention a rock chestnut that grows in the Ozarks. 1879. This is kind of interesting. We're in Oklahoma, and one of the gentlemen with Pioneer Force has a good friend that's Cherokee. His name is Tino Burnett. And I told AJ about this gentleman too. I interviewed him on the phone. He's come to a few of our meetings, but his health is getting so bad, he could not be here. And so the people that remember so the first person recollection is getting rare, so that's why I'm glad that we're filming this and that sort of thing. And he says, I remember the trees when I was a kid growing up in Oklahoma. And Joe, I like your recollection that you did. That was really good, talking about the trees. And he said, I used to walk in the woods with bare feet, and boy, my skin was tough then. But I'd step on one of those burrs, and boy, would it hurt. They're the sweetest nut you ever didn't want to eat. I remember a tree back in 1963 that was just loaded with them Chinquapins. They grew on a hillside, down a gully, on a creek bank. They just grew all over the place, but not real abundant. In Oklahoma, the biggest one I ever saw were about 79 inches diameter. And he said, on the phone, he told me this, I'd love to see another Chinquapin before I die, but I don't think I will. I mailed him some seed, and he lives at Uchi, okay, Oklahoma. And for some reason, the seed didn't make it. I thought he got them. I sent him another shipment and another one. And he went out, this gentleman went out with his grandchildren and actually planted those trees. And I was on the phone with him just before I got up here too. And those things are about 8 or 12 inches long. And I sent grow tubes to him. So Tino Burnett went out with his grandchildren planting a tree, and he remembered. And so that's kind of some of the stuff that we made happen together. So what happened to the trees? Well, one of the largest mass extinctions in modern history is the American chestnut. So to understand what happened to the Ozark Chinquapin, you got to go back and look on this. In the late 1800s, we think the chestnut blight showed up on the East Coast, and Cryphonectria parasitica is a Latin name. And so it wiped out about 3.7 billion American chestnut trees. And they represent about 1/4 of all the trees in eastern U.S. So when you're on the east side of the Mississippi River, 1 out of 4 trees was American chestnut. And the loss of this tree was so devastating, they predicted that there would be a significant drop in the wildlife. It was that important. People ate them, but we didn't have American chestnuts natively growing on the west side of the river. We had the Ozark Chinquapin. And this is one of the first ones I saw. And anybody else in the right mind wouldn't have done what I did that day. I drove a long, long way and met up with a guy near the border of Missouri and Arkansas. And he knew a hill where there's still some at, with the old stumps, sprouts there in one tree, as well as the old logs laying in the woods. And it was thundering, lightning, pouring down rain, and he said, you still want to go? I said, yes. So we got out there. You can't tell it, but it's raining here in this picture. That's why the quality is so low. And so these were the stump sprouts right here. This is what you'll see. So it went from a tree to a shrub-like status. You know, tree 2 to 3 feet in diameter, that. So at least in Missouri, logging practices would remove all the timber. There's places in Arkansas where you didn't have the big sawmills like we did, but in Missouri, single stumps by 1890, they were all cut away. And I know AJ's done a lot of work on this. We've done a lot of interviews, we've done a lot of survey notes, and they completely removed everything. Well, with the Ozark Chinquapin, you know, with the blight, later on you're going to lose the seed base. This is one of the first trees I went to check out. This is in 1991. This is a Grand Champion Ozark Chinquapin. Harold, does that look like a big tree? Does that look like a big tree? Yeah. Well, this particular tree right here, I drove all the way down to Clark County, Arkansas to see it. And there's another one right behind it. It's not a stump sprout, it's a separate tree. But there's a tornado that happened in 1991 right after this. And it blew this tree down, ripped this one out of the ground. And they sawed that one off and the stump snapped back up. But the gentleman that owns that land, a friend of his, collected nuts. And I'm glad to say that we've got the genetics of this tree growing on research test plots. And the seed everybody got last year had some of the genetics of this same tree actually in with that. So that was saved from the work we've been doing. So you went from a tree to a blighted sprout stump sprout. So this is a real rocky ground here, and these are probably only about 8 feet tall. So logging practices, later the chestnut blight will eliminate them. And if you can find them somewhere out in the woods, and Harold lives down by Deere, Arkansas, and you can still see, if you haven't had a forest fire in the old woodland out there. And you can see the leaves chewed up really good. The insects absolutely love them. And I do a lot of burns. A lot of us do fire management. It's just part of our mission statement. But if you have a stump sprout like this, where you have dead wood in immediate proximity to green sprouts, we're having mortality on it. We're starting to lose them. And last night, just hearing Al talk about how that at Hobbs State Park, he doesn't see any flowering trees there. That doesn't sound real good. You know, we used to have them. So